Well, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and kick things off. I'm Olivia DeRugna. I'm the Watchable Wildlife Biologist with Nebraska Game and Parks. I'm out in Scottsbluff, out in western Nebraska, and I'm here today and I'll talk to you a little bit about birding as a hobby. It's fantastic. Some birding tips, how to submit your observations for the City Nature Challenge, and possible birds you'll see during the City Nature Challenge. Today I have Allie Mays as my co-host. Allie, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allie Mays, and I'm the Community Science Specialist with Nebraska Game and Parks. And I'll just be monitoring the chat and helping Olivia see all of your questions, and then also trying to provide you with helpful links along the way. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and insert them into the chat.
Awesome. Okay, so when you think of birding, you might think of it as a competitive hobby, as what's portrayed in media and movies like The Big Year. You may even think that it's just a bunch of people chasing around birds all across the state and country just so they can check it off their list. Or maybe you've even tried birding before, but you didn't feel welcome as a birder. This cartoon kind of sums up some experiences I've had as a birder growing up. I know when I first started birding, I was kind of looked at like the crazy pigeon lady and Home Alone 2. I had my binoculars. I was the only one my age that was out birding and looking at birds and seeing what they were doing. Luckily for me and many other birders, it's a growing hobby all around the world. More and more people are birding, and it's a great hobby for anybody, any age, any ability, any location. You can look at birds and enjoy them wherever you are. So, how do you begin birding and really partake in this enriching hobby? There are a few things that can help you with identifying birds along the way. So time of day, when you think about when birds are active, a lot of songbirds are active in early mornings. So especially around the City Nature Challenge time, which is end of April and early May, we'll start getting those warblers coming in. And so a lot of these tiny little songbirds that are really colorful, they're coming up from Central and South America. And early mornings, they'll be really active, feeding on bugs that are up in the tree canopies, singing away. But if you're not a morning person, don't worry. There are birds all times of day. In the afternoons, there's raptors like hawks, like the Swainson's hawk pictured here. And then even in evenings, you'll get owls calling and possibly whippoorwills and nighthawks as well. Thinking about the location, really any place with food, water, shelter, and space, there will be birds. So that could be a prairie, it could be a forest, it could be your backyard, it could even be in the middle of an urban space. When it comes to gear, I would say a phone is very helpful, especially now with a lot of apps out there that can help you with birding. Binoculars are really good to have. I like 8x42s. They work pretty well for identifying and seeing a variety of birds. You can have a camera with you as well. Some people have scopes, which can be valuable for looking at those distant birds, especially on the big water bodies that we have around Nebraska. It can be difficult to see those waterfowl that are way out in the middle of the lakes. If you like to take notes and keep your own handwritten observations, writing the Rain Journal is always great. And then there's also a variety of field guides out there too. So here in Nebraska, we are super lucky because we have both eastern and western birds. One thing though, that a lot of the field guides are broken up either with eastern birds or western birds. You can get comprehensive field guides that cover all of the North American birds, but that will be really heavy to carry around. So some other field guides that are out there are the Birds of Nebraska, as well as Pocket Guide to Birds of Nebraska, and then a laminated folded Nebraska bird sheet. But if you're like me and you don't like carrying around a field guide all the time, there are a few apps out there. So I use the Sibley Bird ID app. It does cost money, but it's basically a full field guide at my own fingertips, and I can listen to bird songs and calls. I can compare species and get basically everything that would be in those hard copy field guides, which I still have and I keep at home or in my backpack, but I just don't always carry with me. But the apps can be valuable. Then there's also the Merlin Bird ID app. This is great, it's free, and it can help you ID birds as well. So it'll take you through what size was the bird, what's the main colors, where did you see it? And now there's also the opportunity to add your own photos or recordings, and it'll help you pinpoint what species you saw. All right, so now you're out there and you are ready to bird. How do you identify the birds? First, you kind of want to get that overall impression. So you want to look at the size of the bird, and just think about the size relative to birds you already are familiar with. So is it tiny like a little house wren? Or is it large like a bald eagle or a Canada goose? Or is it somewhere in between, maybe like robin size or crow size? By kind of doing that visual comparison, it can really help you eliminate birds that aren't the right size, and help you identify the species. You also want to look at the shape. So is it like a wading bird, like a great blue heron? Is it more like a shorebird? Is it perching like a little songbird? Or maybe it's got the outline like an owl. And my favorite thing to watch is the behavior. This helps me kind of pinpoint what bird I'm looking at, because sometimes they're pretty distant and hard to see. So some birds are perched at the top of the canopy, like the scarlet tanager, which you may be able to see during the City Nature Challenge. They should just start arriving end of April, early May. Or maybe even the eastern kingbird. So they're usually perched out in the middle of an open field. Maybe you see a bird that's perched on a wire, and then it does like these acrobatic movements to catch an insect out of the air and goes back to the perch to eat them. That could be a sign that it's a western kingbird, like this one shown. Or maybe the bird's just soaring through the sky, like this turkey vulture. I noticed earlier this week that the turkey vultures just started showing up, and they're always fun to watch. The way they kind of surf the waves of the wind, especially out here in western Nebraska. It's pretty windy and they're always moving crazy movements with the wind here. Maybe the bird that you're watching is on the ground. So maybe it's hopping around looking for seed. Maybe it's kicking up leaf litter on the ground. That's a good sign that it's a ground dwelling bird. And that can really eliminate some species that are typically higher in the canopy. And then there's the markings. So when you have your binoculars on a species, or you're lucky enough to get a close look, maybe through a window at a bird perched on your bird feeder, there are a lot of different markings to look for. And this can be overwhelming for beginning, intermediate, and even expert birders to remember all these markings and know what to look for. But don't worry. Not here to scare you off, just get the overall impression of a bird. So for instance, this bird that we see here, overall, it's like a blue color. The wings and the tail look a little bit darker. It kind of looks like it's got a circle around its eye, and it kind of looks like it's going to be about goldfinch size. So these are my overall impressions of it. I'm not looking at each of these individual markings. I'm just looking at a few that stand out to me. And by doing this, you can kind of start to eliminate some other similar looking species that would be showing up in Nebraska as well. So it doesn't have that rusty chest or the white belly of a eastern bluebird. It's also a little bit smaller in size too. Same with the blue grosbeak. It's hard to see in this photo, but the blue grosbeak has some rust in the wings. So unlike this bird that we have here, we don't have any rust in the wings. It's also a slightly different blue color. The blue grosbeak has a bit of a thicker bill than the bird that we have here. And so by eliminating, looking at these little comparisons and these markings, it helps us eliminate similar looking birds. And so we're able to determine this bird here is the indigo bunting. So diving a little bit deeper into some markings that you can look for when you're out birding. Think about the bill shape. So like the northern cardinal has a really thick bill. Compared to many warblers, like the yellow warbler here, they have much thinner bills. And then if you're in a pine forested area, like out here in Scottsbluff, you might see a bird that the beak almost looks like it's broken, but it's actually crossed to help it open some seeds in the pine cones. And so that's a crossbill. Or maybe you notice a bird that's got a weird down curved bill, like the one in the bottom corner here. You can look at tail tip. So some species like the cedar waxwing on the left-hand side, they have this bright yellow tail tip. And that's a great thing to look for. And they're kind of overall brownish gray birds. So that yellow tail tip can really stand out in the trees. And then the eastern kingbird has this very contrasting white and black plumage, but this bright white tail tip to it. Maybe the bird that you see looks like it's wearing glasses. Some birds that you may see during the City Nature Challenge are the field sparrow here and the Nashville warbler. Both of these kind of look like they just have this bright white outline around their eye. The beak color. So you don't often think about beak color in birds, but that can be a good giveaway. So the marbled godwit has a pale beak color towards the base near its head. And then as you move out towards the tip of the beak, it turns black. While the northern cardinal, the female often throws people off because it looks so much different than the male. But look for that thick orange beak of the female cardinal. And then leg color too. So especially with tiny little songbirds like warblers that are high up in the canopy, it can really be difficult to see the top side of them, even like an eye ring or their back plumage. So sometimes you are relying on leg color to tell the species. So like the blackpoll warbler has yellow legs and yellow feet. Shorebirds too. So like the yellow legs, the greater and lesser yellow legs have bright yellow legs like their names describe, compared to other shorebirds like the marble godwit we saw in the previous slide. And listening to song and calls. So this is a great way to identify species since each bird has its own unique song and call. And a great place to start is in your own backyard. So think about the birds that you see and hear almost every day, like the chickadee. So luckily for us, many birds have are named after their songs. So like chickadee, chickadee dee dee dee. And actually with them, you can kind of know if a predator's around. So the more D's that are added to the chickadee song, the more likely there's like a Cooper's hawk or a cat or some other predator nearby. And then barred owls, many folks know the who cooks for you all. You're super lucky if you actually get to hear them. It's such a hoot to hear them call, and especially going back and forth. Some other tips for listening to the song and call. Think about whether it sounds like very clear and crisp. So I often think of cardinals when it comes to the clear and crisp songs. And so hopefully you all were able to hear that. They are almost flute-like, just very beautiful. While other birds like the northern parula are much more buzzy, and they have like a distinct call to them. Once you learn it and practice it, it helps you pinpoint some of these birds that might be hiding out among the leaves and difficult to see. I'll play the northern parula for you here. So it's really buzzy, very different from the cardinal. And then as you get to learn and become more familiar with bird songs, you'll notice when you're watching TV and movies that the bird that's being shown isn't always the one that's calling. A good one that happens a lot is the bald eagle. Often it's not the bald eagle calling, often it's a red-tailed hawk. Let's see if I can pull that up. So usually you see a bald eagle and you hear the red tail calling. Another important thing to consider when you're out birding, especially during the City Nature Challenge, is thinking about the habitat. So if you're walking in the woods, like at Wilderness Park, you might see house wrens or hear them, especially near brushy piles. You'll probably hear and see a variety of woodpeckers, like the hairy woodpecker, which is a bigger version of the downy, basically. And again, those warblers are coming up from their wintering grounds in Central and South America. And so we should have some orange crown warblers here, as well as yellow rumped warblers. So keep an eye out for those tiny little songbirds. Maybe you'll hear the buzzing or melodic call of some of them, and that kind of gives you a sense of where to look. We're also fortunate here in Nebraska to have a lot of different wetlands around our urban areas. So this was taken at the Lincoln Saline Wetlands. And so you might see American coot. You might see a variety of ducks like the blue-winged teal here. You may even hear some really weird sounds coming from the reeds, which could be the sora, which has a very distinct and almost a laugh-like call, but very unique. So if you hear that, try and get a recording because they are really hard to get pictures of. And the final thing to think about is the range. So if you're in the eastern half of the state, you'll likely get the northern cardinal on the City Nature Challenge. But out here in the western half of the state, cardinals are harder to come by. So just to recap what we went over here, remember, just get that overall impression. So the size, what's the size of it compared to birds that you're already familiar with? Think about the shape. Is it perching? Is it more like a shorebird? What's its behavior? Is it up in the canopy or is it out in the open? Think about those markings that we went through. Listen to its song, and if you can, get a recording of the song. And then also think about the habitat, so where you're at and what birds might be there. And then also the range of the species. And now before you go birding, there are some things to keep in mind. We don't want to disturb any birds. We want to enjoy them in their natural state, doing their natural behaviors. So just, keep your distance as much as possible. Binoculars are great for that. It can be difficult to get a photo with your phone, but I'll show you in a little bit how we can do that for the City Nature Challenge. Staying quiet is key for birding. So you can hear all the birds, you're not disturbing them. And then staying on trails too, so you're not potentially hurting a nest or scaring the birds anymore. And then like any other outdoor activity, just being considerate of other people around you, staying quiet, not moving too quickly so you're not scaring the bird away that they're watching. And make sure to respect property boundaries and pack in what you pack out. So don't litter. All right, now we are ready to go birding. So this is a little cartoony, but it gives you a sense since we can't all be together birding today. So we're in the woods, pick your favorite park, and we're walking along the path and we see a little bird going up the side of the trunk. Now in the chat, go ahead and write what you see about this bird. So what are some of the behaviors, the markings? What's your overall impression of this? So I'll give you guys a minute to write in the chat.
So one person said it has a long tail. It's upside down on the branch, kind of hanging off the branch. Jamie says there's cool feet for climbing the tree trunk. Megan says it has a white chest. Pretty good observations.
Yeah, this is great. Well, we don't even need to look through our binoculars at this bird, but if we were to, this might be a view that you'd have of it. And so, yeah, you could see that white chest. You can see that long tail. You might see how the tail is really pointed or the bill is curved. Maybe you see how the back pattern is, it kind of camouflages the bird in with the bark. All great observations. And so from these observations, you can kind of narrow it down and figure out that it's a brown creeper. Hopefully they stick around for the City Nature Challenge. Many of them will be heading further north to their breeding grounds at the end of April. So keep an eye out and especially keep an ear out for these birds. They are, once you hear their song, it's really unique and it'll stick with you. So the brown creeper has a really high-pitched song I'm about to play. So their song kind of combines that flute-like, beautiful, melodic song, and then there's a little bit of buzziness to it as well. So keep an ear and an eye out for them as you're hiking through the woods. All right, so we're back on the path. We notice a bird in front of us. What are some things you notice about this bird?
All right, Maureen says that the bird is staying on the ground.
Yeah.
Another person said it's a ground bird, short and thick bill. That's a good one.
Nice. All right, we're gonna take a look through our binoculars. And you guys were great. It does have that short and thick bill. It was hopping on the ground. Maybe you notice the contrasting white belly with like an overall brown appearance. And this can help you identify this bird as the Eastern Towhee. So the females are typically more brown, while the males have more black head and back. They are mostly in eastern Nebraska, but there are some hybrids between the eastern and spotted towhees in the central part of the state. And as you move westward, you're more likely to see a spotted towhee, which looks pretty similar to these. And they're often on the ground. When I'm birding, I usually hear leaves rustling, and then I look under a bush, and then it's usually these birds that are foraging on the ground. So you guys did great. And maybe I have a bunch of pro birders on here, so I don't even need to give these tips, but birds can be challenging to ID, and don't get discouraged when you go out and look at birds and you're not sure what the ID is. Many species, they have a duller fall and winter plumage, but come spring and summer, they're much brighter, like the American goldfinch. Even males and females can have different plumages. So on the left-hand side, there's a male goldfinch in the front, and then in the background, you can see the female goldfinch, which doesn't have the bright yellow plumage. But there are a lot of tools and resources out there that can help you identify birds. So some of them, we talked about the Merlin Bird ID app earlier. It's a great resource for helping you pinpoint and figure out the birds that you're looking at or hearing. I use the Larkwire app, and that really helps me practice and learn new bird songs. It'll quiz you on similar sounding bird songs. eBird's a great resource for not only submitting checklists, but also looking to see what people are, what birds they're seeing around you. And most recently seen birds at whatever location you're trying to go bird at. All About Birds is a great resource. If you see a bird, you want to learn a little bit more about it, and they have a bunch of fun facts on there too. And then here in Nebraska, we're really fortunate to have Birds of Nebraska online. It gives specific sightings of birds, like early and late occurrences, as well as peak migration for many species here, as well as the range maps for birds in Nebraska. And then coming this May is the Nebraska Birding Guide website, and that'll give you some great tips on where to go birding, as well as birding tips, kind of like what we were talking about today. And then for the CNC, we'll be using Inaturalist. It's another great resource and tool for birding, and it's a great way to connect with nature all around you and the community as well. And we'll go into a little more detail about Inaturalist shortly. So now that you know how to bird and you're excited to go birding, the City Nature Challenge is a perfect time to start birding, or to even just hone in on your bird ID skills. It's super easy to participate, and you'd be participating along with people all around the world. So more than 400 cities are participating this year. And basically you just document the animals, plants, fungi, scat and tracks that you see through Inaturalist. And so here in Nebraska, we have a few counties that are competing with each other. So Lancaster County, Madison County, Lincoln County, and Scottsbluff County. You don't have to make observations strictly in these counties. You can make them anywhere, and it'll go into the Nebraska project as a whole. So to submit observations for the City Nature Challenge, which is April 29th to May 2nd, mark your calendars. Step one, you want to download the Inaturalist app to your smartphone or set up an online account. Again, these are the locations that have a little friendly competition going on, but you can participate anywhere.
Sorry to cut in, Olivia.
Yep.
Omaha is also participating. Omaha
Yes.
metro area. Yeah.
Good call. Yeah, Omaha. Make sure if you're there that you participate around the Omaha County too. So to make an observation, it's super easy to make one with plants because they don't move. Birds, it's a little bit trickier. So once you have your account set up, you just click on the camera at the bottom of your phone, and it has the observe button. It'll take you to this next screen where you can choose whether you have a photo, whether you want to use your camera. If you've already taken a photo in your photo library, you can upload it, or you can record a sound. So again, it's hard to get a close picture of birds using your phone. Sometimes what I do is I hold my phone up to my binoculars to get a picture. Even then, it still can be pretty distant, like this goldfinch that is on this bird feeder here. Just try and get a few pictures if you can. I took about 10 pictures before I got this clear one. You can also, if you have a digital camera, take photos with that. It might be a little bit easier. to get those distant bird photos, and then you can upload them through your computer through the Inaturalist website. And as you'll learn with birding and trying to get photos of birds, often they don't cooperate. And when you just get your camera set up and you get it right, they often fly away. This cartoon captures that perfectly. But there's another way you can submit observations to Inaturalist, and that's with the record sound. So I love this, and I think this will be super valuable when it comes to getting those bird observations. So if you hear it singing, try and record the sound. Afterwards, you can, if you know what bird it was, you can type that in, or you can see what the Inaturalist app suggests. So this was just a photo of a junco, and it suggested juncos as a species that was here. Make sure when you are doing these, trying to figure out what species it is, that you show nearby suggestions only. You don't want something that wouldn't ever occur in Nebraska to show up as a suggestion. And then also filling out the rest of the information. So typically the location will show up. The date would typically be right. My camera was not set with the right date, so ignore that. And then all the observations, once you share it, it'll be automatically submitted to the project. So if you're doing an observation in Lancaster County, it'll automatically go to the Lancaster City Nature Challenge. And once it's submitted, then the community and other folks in the public can suggest IDs. They can agree with you. And once there's a couple of IDs, the observation becomes research grade. All right, so now we know how to participate in the City Nature Challenge. You're excited and you want to go birding. We're just going to run through quickly some birds you might see in the different habitats across the state. So woodlands, again, you'll probably hear house wren. They're super tiny little birds. A variety of woodpeckers like hairy woodpecker, maybe a blue jay, rose-breasted grosbeaks that should start showing up right around that time as well, and yellow-rumped warblers. The hike and bike trails are great for birding. They're like little treed corridors among large expanses of fields, and so they can attract a variety of species. Maybe you'll see a mourning dove, cedar waxwing. So again, look for that yellow tip to the tail. The turkey vultures soaring in the sky. American robins and grackles foraging in the grass along the side of the trail. There's always a variety of grassland areas around urban spots too. So this is the marsh wren community wetlands, or the saline wetlands, or Scottsbluff Monument. There's grasslands all over that are within these counties. And so you might hear, depending on where you're at, eastern or western meadowlarks. Those are great for getting recordings of their song because they can be difficult to tell apart just based on their looks. Northern harriers, they're very active right now, courting and flying low over the grasses, so you might see them foraging. Eastern bluebirds, especially if they're near nest boxes. American goldfinches perched on old sunflower seeds or sunflowers, and a variety of sparrows in the pathways. So hair sparrows are typically the larger of the sparrows that'll be hanging out in the paths. And don't forget about parking lots. So when you go grocery shopping, look for birds too and submit those during the City Nature Challenge. So You might see gulls. There could be killdeers that are calling because they're trying to nest on the roof. Maybe there's house sparrows trying to nest in the lettering of the stores. Maybe there's some geese or ducks or crows flying overhead. Local parks are great for checking out birds. So waterfowl on the lake like blue-winged teal and geese. Great blue herons could be lurking along the shore. Listen for chickadees up in the trees, as well as woodpeckers like the northern flicker. And always look up. I mean, there's always hawks flying around. Nebraska is great for the raptors. And so I bet you'll see a red-tailed hawk flying overhead. But if you don't feel like going anywhere, you can always just look for birds in your backyard. Bird feeders and bird baths are great for attracting birds, but you don't need those. You could just have some shrubs and trees, and you might get a Cooper's hawk or a junco coming in. Again, look up into the sky. There's always a variety of birds flying overhead. And really, there's just birds are everywhere, and they're really incredible to watch. And the City Nature Challenge is a great excuse to just get out and really observe, listen, look, watch their behaviors, and just be in that present moment with the birds around you and nature around you. And you get to be a part of this global project. So I hope you all consider partaking in the City Nature Challenge. Again, it's April 29th to May 2nd. We do have some upcoming speaker series events. So Incredible Invertebrates, April 12th. Fantastic Fungi, which is part of the Nature Nerd Night, is April 19th. Scales, Tails, and Scat, April 26th. And then after the City Nature Challenge, we'll have some ID parties. So I hope you join me May 4th for Birds and Insects. And with that, I'll take any questions. I think Allie may have put the links for our Nebraska focused City Nature Challenge, as well as the global one in the chat already. But thank you all for joining. And if you're out in Scottsbluff, make sure you submit your observations.